Welcome back to another video. Thank you all for watching. Tonight we'll follow the quiet daily life of a medieval peasant. Don't forget to tell me where you're listening in from, and subscribe, but only if you enjoy the story. Now let us settle in and take a gentle journey back to a small village in medieval Europe, where the morning begins with the soft stirrings of daily life. The first light of dawn creeps slowly over the thatched rooftops, casting a faint golden haze across the village. A thin mist lingers in the low-lying fields, curling around the sturdy wooden fences and the small humble homes. From within one of these cottages, the day begins quietly. A peasant named Thomas, though in this time names are familiar and often repeated among neighbours, stirs beneath a coarse linen blanket. The mattress is little more than a straw-filled pallet, but it offers warmth against the chill of the early morning air. Thomas rises slowly, listening for the soft sounds of the village coming to life. Somewhere down the lane, a goat bleats, and a rooster crows insistently, announcing that the sun is indeed on its way. The air is crisp and carries the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, a familiar mixture that signals both the promise and labour of the day ahead. He swings his legs over the side of the bed, careful not to disturb the small clay lamp that still glows faintly with the last embers from the night before. The cottage is simple. One room divided by a low partition where the family sleeps in shifts or shares the space. A small hearth sits at the centre, its blackened stones evidence of countless meals prepared over the years. Thomas reaches to stir the fire, coaxing the embers back to life with a few dry twigs. Soon a thin line of smoke curls upward, and the aroma of burning wood mingles with the smell of last night's cooking, faint but comforting. Morning chores begin. As the village slowly stretches awake, Thomas steps outside, the dew soaking through the rough-soled shoes he wears. The fields beyond the cottages are alive with soft sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant lowing of cattle, and the careful clatter of a neighbour's tools. He walks toward the small pen where a few chickens scratch at the earth, scattering the last remnants of grain from the previous day. He scatters fresh feed, moving deliberately, enjoying the simplicity of the motion, the rhythm of bending and reaching, watching the birds peck with patient persistence. Nearby, other villagers begin their own routines. A woman carries a basket of water from the well, balancing it skillfully atop her hip, as she nods politely to Thomas. Children, still drowsy from sleep, tumble out of their cottages, running after one another with carefree energy, their laughter echoing softly through the mist. A dog trots along the lane, sniffing at the morning air, tail wagging in quiet anticipation of the day's movement. Once the animals are tended, Thomas turns to the garden patch behind the cottage. In the summer months, the patch is full of beans, herbs and early vegetables, each row carefully spaced to allow the sun to reach every stem. Today he inspects the leaves for pests, pulls weeds that have dared to sprout overnight, and waters the soil with a bucket from the well. There is a certain calm in these small, necessary actions, a rhythm that eases the mind and prepares the body for the more demanding tasks ahead. Breakfast is a modest affair, shared quietly with his family. Bread, coarse and slightly dense, is torn into pieces and dipped into a small bowl of thin gruel or porridge. Occasionally, if the household is fortunate, a small portion of cheese or a few preserved berries are added, providing a subtle sweetness to the otherwise simple meal. Conversation is minimal, often limited to the practical details of the day, what work must be done, what chores remain, and what small errands might be needed in the village or fields. By mid-morning, Thomas is ready to head out to the fields. The village stretches along a narrow, winding path that leads toward the larger tracts of land, tilled by the peasants. Each family has its own strip of soil, often modest in size, yet every inch counts. The work is steady and methodical, turning the soil, planting seeds, tending young shoots and clearing stones or debris. Sweat beads on the forehead beneath the simple linen cap, and the hands grow rougher with each season's labour. Yet there is satisfaction in shaping the earth, in nurturing life from the soil. Other peasants work nearby, their motions mirrored in careful repetition. Some walk slowly, guiding oxen that pull wooden ploughs, while others bend low to tend individual plants, their movements deliberate and unhurried. Occasionally a neighbour calls across the field, exchanging greetings or news, brief and matter-of-fact, before returning to the task at hand. There is no rush, no urgency beyond the steady marking of time by the sun and the slow passage of shadows across the tilled earth. As the day moves forward, the sun climbs higher, warming the village and brightening the fields. Thomas pauses to drink from a water skin, wiping his brow with the sleeve of his tunic. He observes the patterns of the land, the furrows that crisscross the soil, the gentle rise of the meadow toward the horizon, and the faint outlines of distant woods where the villagers sometimes gather firewood or forage for berries and mushrooms. Nature shapes the rhythm of life here. The length of the day dictates work hours. The seasons determine crops, and the weather influences every decision, from planting to harvesting. Midday brings a brief respite. The peasants gather in small clusters, resting in the shade of trees or leaning against fences, sharing simple food, often bread, cheese, and occasionally dried meat. Conversation is soft, practical, and often interspersed with quiet laughter. The village is alive, yet in a gentle, persistent way, free of urgency, bound together by shared labor and mutual reliance. Children sometimes approach, offering freshly picked herbs or berries, learning the rhythms of work through observation and absorbing the small details of village life that will guide them in the years to come. After the brief meal, Thomas returns to the fields, continuing his work with patient diligence. The hours pass slowly, marked by the changing light, the shifting temperature, and the occasional cry of a bird overhead. In the distance, the local lord's manor rises modestly above the village, yet it feels distant, almost removed from the immediate concerns of everyday life. For Thomas and his fellow villagers, the world is measured by the soil, the animals, and the routines that sustain life: planting, tending, harvesting, repairing, and preserving. As afternoon wanes, Thomas attends to the animals again. The cows are milked carefully, the goats guided back to their pens, and the chickens collected for the evening. The barn smells faintly of hay and livestock, earthy and warm. Tools are gathered and cleaned, prepared for the next day's work, and the small wooden fence repaired where a stray branch or heavy wind has caused a gap. Each action is deliberate, part of the continuous cycle of care that defines peasant life. Evening approaches gently, the light softening across the fields and cottages. Smoke rises from chimneys as neighbours prepare their evening meals, and the sounds of the village soften as the children are called inside. Thomas returns to the cottage, hands weary but steady, and begins the simple tasks of dinner preparation. Vegetables are boiled or roasted, grains cooked, and the humble meal set upon the table. Conversation is calm, reflective, and sometimes punctuated by the quiet comment of a child or the soft laughter of a sibling. After dinner, the family gathers near the hearth, listening to the wind outside and the occasional hoot of an owl from the surrounding woods. The fire crackles, casting dancing shadows upon the walls. Stories are shared, often brief recollections or practical advice passed from parent to child, gentle instruction in the ways of daily life, the subtleties of work, and the expectations of the seasons. Outside, the village settles into a quiet hush. Lanterns flicker in the distance, and the last of the villagers finish their evening tasks, preparing for rest and renewal. Finally, as night deepens, Thomas climbs into his straw-filled pallet, the quiet of the cottage wrapping around him like a familiar cloak. The village sleeps under a canopy of stars, the distant howl of a fox or the rustle of nocturnal animals, the only reminders that life continues beyond the walls of the small homes. Thomas breathes deeply, the calm of the day settling in his body and mind, and slowly drifts into sleep, ready to rise with the dawn and repeat the steady, enduring rhythm of peasant life once more. The quiet of the night lingers as the hearth cools, and the fields rest under the gentle gaze of the moon. Outside, the village sleeps, each cottage a small island of warmth and life in the cool evening air, each peasant resting before another day of steady work and quiet reflection. The first light of morning shifts slowly across the village, and Thomas awakens again with the rising sun. Though today is slightly cooler than yesterday, the frost clings to the edges of the thatched roofs, sparkling faintly where the sun first touches it. Inside his modest cottage, the air is crisp, carrying a hint of smoke from the hearth that was left smouldering through the night. Thomas stretches, carefully stepping over the rough floorboards to avoid the small bowls and tools that remain from the previous evening. His family still sleeps quietly, their steady breaths rising and falling, filling the room with a calm, familiar rhythm. He moves to rekindle the fire, gently blowing on the embers until a small flame flickers to life. The warmth spreads slowly, and he sets a small pot of water to boil for the morning gruel. Outside, the village begins to stir as well. A rooster crows somewhere nearby, announcing the day with measured insistence. The faint sound of metal striking wood drifts from the blacksmith's yard, though the work has barely begun, and the soft bleating of goats signals that the animals too are awake and ready for care. After attending to the fire and water, Thomas steps outside. The air is cold against his skin, carrying the earthy scent of frost-covered soil and the lingering aroma of morning smoke. A thin layer of mist clings to the fields, curling around the fences and wandering through the low-lying hollows. He moves first to the animal pens, scattering feed for the chickens and checking the small herd of goats. Each animal is accounted for, their coats thick against the chill, their eyes bright and alert. The goats stretch and bleat softly, nudging each other for space or attention. Thomas's hands are steady as he tends them, brushing the straw and ensuring the water troughs are full. Nearby, other villagers begin their morning work. A woman carries a basket of freshly drawn water from the well, balancing it carefully as she nods a quiet greeting. Children, bundled in simple tunics, rush out of their cottages, clumping together in small groups to chase one another through the morning mist. Their laughter is light and fleeting, echoing faintly across the village as the faint sun rises, tinting the fog with soft golden hues. Once the animals are settled, Thomas walks toward the garden patch behind his cottage. In spring, the earth is soft and fertile, though cold, and he kneels to inspect the young shoots, pulling weeds and ensuring that each plant has enough space and sunlight to thrive. His hands move in careful repetition, planting seeds with deliberate precision, pressing the soil gently over them. There is a rhythm in the work, a slow, satisfying cadence that soothes the mind even as it demands the body's effort. By mid-morning, the first chores completed, Thomas joins a few neighbors in the larger field on the outskirts of the village. The group moves steadily, guiding oxen as they pull plows, tilling the soil for the day's planting. The sound of the plow cutting through the earth is constant, punctuated only by the occasional call across the field or the snort of an ox adjusting its pace. Thomas keeps pace beside the animals, holding the plow with steady hands, feeling the pull through his arms and shoulders. It is laborious work, but there is satisfaction in the tangible results, furrows of dark, rich soil stretching in neat lines across the land. Around him, the village continues its slow rhythm. Women move between cottages, carrying baskets or tending to domestic chores, while older children help with the lighter tasks, learning the necessary skills of tending livestock or managing the garden. The day is measured by the sun's position, the shadows growing longer as it climbs the sky. Each action is deliberate, guided by necessity and experience, the continuity of work binding the villagers together in shared purpose. As the morning deepens, Thomas pauses briefly to drink from his water skin and wipe the sweat from his brow, the sun beginning to warm the air. He observes the patterns of daily life unfolding around him. A neighbor guiding a cow back to pasture, a child chasing after a stray hen, the blacksmith hammering steadily on a piece of iron in the distance. Even as the work is demanding, there is a calm persistence in the movements, a quiet satisfaction in the continuity of life and labor. The noon meal brings a short respite. Thomas sits under the shade of a lone oak near the edge of the fields, breaking bread with a small portion of cheese and washed down with a sip of water. He listens to the faint sounds of the village, the wind rustling through the trees, the distant lowing of cattle, and the occasional murmur of conversation among neighbors. Children gather nearby, sharing small stories or comparing their modest collections of objects from the fields, sticks, stones or feathers, and their chatter rises and falls with the gentle wind. After the brief meal, work resumes. Thomas returns to the fields, inspecting the crops for pests, and ensuring that each row is maintained carefully. The sun continues its steady arc, and the air grows warmer, carrying the subtle fragrance of fresh earth and growing plants. The villagers move with quiet determination, guided by the demands of the land and the seasons. Each day follows this measured rhythm, tending, planting, repairing, and observing. By mid-afternoon, Thomas shifts his attention to the livestock once more. The cows are milked slowly and carefully, each animal accustomed to the routine. The goats are herded back into their pens, and the chickens collected from the outer range. Tools are cleaned, fences repaired, and small tasks completed that ensure the smooth running of the household and farm. There is a sense of completeness in these actions, the day's labor providing not only sustenance but a quiet, enduring order to life. Evening descends gently, the sky turning soft shades of pink and purple. Smoke rises from chimneys, the scent of cooking drifting through the village, mingling with the earthy aroma of fields and animals. Thomas returns to the cottage, hands weary yet steady, and begins preparing a simple meal. Vegetables are boiled, grains simmered, and the humble dinner set upon the table. Conversation is quiet and reflective, the family sharing observations of the day, small anecdotes and gentle guidance. Outside, the village settles into a calm hush, the last of the children called inside, and the adults completing their final chores. After the meal, the family gathers near the hearth. The fire crackles softly, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Thomas listens to the faint sounds of night beginning to take hold, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a night bird, and the low murmur of nocturnal animals in the surrounding woods. Stories are shared, often brief and practical, teaching children about the land, the animals, and the ways of everyday life. The calm warmth of the hearth and the quiet closeness of family provide a comforting closure to the day's labor. As darkness deepens, Thomas climbs into his straw-stuffed pallet, the cool air of the cottage mixing with the warmth of the hearth. The village sleeps, each household a small sanctuary against the night. Thomas breathes slowly, the quiet of the evening settling in, and drifts into a gentle sleep. Outside, The fields rest beneath the soft glow of the moon, the village held in the steady, enduring rhythm of life that will resume again with the dawn. The following morning arrives with a gentle hush, the sun spilling pale light across the village rooftops. Thomas stirs beneath the familiar weight of his blanket, the straw pallet beneath him firm but yielding, carrying the subtle warmth of yesterday's labor. The air is cool, tinged with the faint scent of dew and the distant smoke of other cottages stirring to life. Outside, the soft crowing of a rooster blends with the occasional bleat of goats and the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. Thomas rises carefully, mindful not to wake his younger siblings who still lie curled beneath their blankets, and moves toward the hearth to coax a flame from the embers left over from the night. A small pot of water begins to heat over the fire, and the familiar aroma of burning wood spreads through the cottage. Thomas uses the time to prepare a simple breakfast: coarse bread, perhaps a little cheese or a small smear of butter if the household is fortunate. The family gathers quietly around the table, sharing the morning meal in soft conversation, discussing chores, weather, and the small events that make up village life. Even these brief exchanges carry the rhythm and continuity of life, each word and gesture part of the steady pulse of the day. Once breakfast is done, Thomas steps outside into the crisp morning air. The village is slowly coming alive. Children chase one another along the narrow lanes, their laughter echoing faintly off the timbered cottages. Women carry baskets of water or bundles of firewood, nodding greetings to neighbors as they pass. Men emerge from their homes, tools in hand, heading toward the fields or tending livestock. The village stretches along a narrow, winding path, each cottage modest and functional, its thatched roof and wattle walls blending naturally into the surrounding land. Thomas begins with the animals, scattering feed for the chickens and checking the goats and cows. Each movement is careful and deliberate, smoothing the straw in the pens, ensuring water troughs are full, and gently coaxing the animals to where they belong. The animals, familiar with the routine, respond with soft bleats or low moos, a sound that has become as ordinary and comforting as the wind rustling through the nearby trees. By mid-morning, Thomas joins other villagers in the fields. Today, the work involves sowing new seeds and tending to early sprouts. Oxen pull plows through the rich, dark soil, and Thomas keeps pace, guiding the wooden plow with steady hands. The sound of earth turning, the rhythmic creak of the oxen harnesses, and the occasional calls between neighbors create a background hum of activity, a gentle but persistent reminder of labor's continuity. Each row of soil carefully prepared, each seed placed with care, represents both necessity and hope, the quiet assurance that life will continue through diligence and patience. As the morning unfolds, Thomas notices the subtle signs of the season. The air carries a faint fragrance of fresh herbs and wild flowers, and the sun rises higher, warming the earth and the villagers alike. A light breeze moves across the fields, carrying the distant sound of a stream and the occasional song of a bird perched in a tree. Nature's presence is constant and unobtrusive, shaping the rhythm of daily life without imposing itself, blending seamlessly with the labor and routines of the village. The midday meal provides a brief pause. Thomas sits beneath a tree near the edge of the fields, breaking bread and sharing modest portions of cheese and dried fruit with a few neighbors who have paused as well. Conversation is gentle and practical, passing on news, advice, or simple observations. Children wander nearby, collecting sticks or observing the work, learning the ways of the land, not through instruction alone but through careful watching and imitation. The sun casts long, warm shadows across the village, a reminder of the slow, steady passage of time. After the meal, Thomas returns to the work at hand. He inspects the garden behind his cottage, gently weeding and ensuring that each plant is free to grow. He tends the vegetables, herbs, and small fruit bushes with patience, pressing soil over roots and adjusting support sticks for climbing plants. The quiet of this work offers a different kind of satisfaction, one that requires care, observation, and a steady hand, teaching attention to detail and a calm endurance. By mid-afternoon, the labor turns once again to livestock. The cows are milked, each animal accustomed to the gentle rhythm of hands and pail. The goats are led back to their pens, and chickens are collected for the evening. Tools are cleaned, fences inspected and repaired where needed, and the small workshop or storeroom is organized for the next day's use. Each task, though simple, contributes to the continuous cycle that sustains the household, providing a sense of order and accomplishment. Evening falls slowly, the sky painted with soft pinks and purples. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the smell of boiling grains and roasted vegetables across the village. Thomas returns to his cottage, hands calloused but steady, and begins preparing the evening meal. Conversation around the table is quiet and reflective, often including practical instruction, small anecdotes, or shared observations from the day. Outside, the village softens into a calm hush, children called inside, and neighbors finishing the last of their chores. After the meal, Thomas sits near the hearth, watching the fire's glow dance across the walls. His family gathers around, speaking in hushed tones, or listening as stories of village life, small observations and advice are shared. The night outside is deep and still, with only the faint rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl breaking the quiet. The warmth of the fire, the gentle murmur of family voices, and the rhythm of a day well spent provide a sense of closure and calm. Finally, as darkness blankets the village, Thomas climbs into his pallet, the straw beneath him familiar and comforting. The hearth cools slowly, and the village sleeps, each cottage a small sanctuary in the cool night air. He breathes deeply, feeling the steady pulse of life around him, and drifts into sleep, ready to greet the dawn once more. The fields, the cottages, and the surrounding woods all rest beneath the soft glow of moonlight, waiting for the continuity of another day to unfold. The next morning breaks quietly over the village, the sky pale and tinged with soft pink where the sun will soon rise. Thomas stirs beneath his straw-filled pallet, stretching slowly as the first light creeps through the small window of his cottage. The air is cool, carrying the subtle scent of damp earth and wood smoke, reminders of the night and of the labor that will come. Outside, a rooster crows insistently, and somewhere in the distance a goat calls softly to its companions. Thomas rises carefully, moving across the rough floorboards to the hearth, where he nudges the remaining embers into flame. He sets a small pot of water to heat, intending to prepare the thin morning gruel that will sustain him before the work in the fields begins. The quiet of the cottage is punctuated only by the soft movements of his family as they begin to awaken. A younger sibling stirs beneath a blanket, and a faint murmur of sleepy conversation passes between them. The simplicity of these sounds, familiar and steady, offers a gentle comfort, a reminder that each day begins in repetition, in the calm continuity of ordinary life. Thomas moves to the animal pens first. The chickens are clucking softly, and the goats shift their weight as he opens the gate. He scatters feed and checks the water troughs, making sure the animals are comfortable and accounted for. Their small movements, the warmth of their bodies, and the quiet sounds they make provide a subtle rhythm to the morning, a steady companion to the work that lies ahead. The cows in the distant pasture lift their heads, the dew catching on their dark coats as they graze slowly, unhurried. Once the animals are tended, Thomas heads toward the garden patch behind the cottage. Here, in spring, the soil is soft and rich, promising growth and sustenance. He bends carefully, pulling weeds, inspecting the young shoots, and ensuring each plant is supported and free from encroachment. The rhythm of planting and tending is deliberate, soothing, and necessary, providing the small but certain satisfaction of contributing to life's ongoing cycle. He notices the delicate green of new leaves, the way sunlight glints across the dewdrops, and the faint hum of bees beginning their morning work. By mid-morning, Thomas joins his neighbors in the larger fields. The work is steady, ploughing, planting, and tending the young crops. Oxen pull the wooden ploughs, the leather harnesses creaking softly as Thomas guides the animals with careful hands. The sound of the earth turning is constant, and the occasional call across the field carries a brief greeting or instruction. Around him, other villagers move with similar purpose, the rhythm of their labor synchronized by necessity and habit. Each furrow turned, each seed planted, is part of a continuity that binds them to the land and to one another. The sun rises higher, warming the air and carrying the scent of soil, plants, and the faint smoke of village hearths. Thomas pauses briefly, wiping sweat from his brow and drinking from a water skin. He observes the subtle changes in light across the fields, the movement of leaves in the breeze, and the distant birds singing from the trees. Nature is ever present, guiding the villagers' work and marking the passing of time, but it is neither commanding nor intrusive, merely part of the steady backdrop to the day. As noon approaches, Thomas and a few neighbors take a short break under the shade of an old oak. Bread, cheese, and a small portion of dried fruit form the midday meal, eaten slowly and deliberately. Conversation is quiet, practical, and often punctuated by the laughter of children playing nearby. They chase one another, collect small treasures from the earth, and observe the adults' work, learning through participation and observation the necessary skills of village life. The air is warm, the sunlight soft, and the world moves with a gentle patience, neither hurried nor stagnant. After the meal, Thomas returns to the fields and his garden. He tends the young plants carefully, adjusting support sticks, removing weeds, and pressing soil over fragile roots. His hands grow rougher with each season's work, yet there is pride in their strength and utility. Nearby, neighbors continue their labor, and the soft sounds of the village, cattle lowing, the creak of wood, distant voices create a gentle, persistent hum of life. Each action is deliberate, measured, and in harmony with the cycles of the earth and the rhythm of the village. By mid-afternoon, Thomas shifts his attention once more to the animals. The cows are milked slowly and carefully, each familiar with the routine. The goats are guided back into their pens, and the chickens collected for the evening. Tools are cleaned and stored, fences inspected and repaired where necessary, and small preparations made for the following day. The work is methodical and steady, providing not only sustenance but also a quiet order to life, a reassurance that the continuity of labor ensures the survival of the household. Evening descends gradually, the sky turning soft shades of orange and violet. Smoke rises from chimneys, carrying the scent of boiling grains and roasted vegetables. Thomas returns to the cottage, weary but steady, and begins the preparation of dinner. Conversation around the table is subdued, reflective, and practical. Observations from the day are shared, advice passed quietly, and gentle laughter punctuates the warmth of family presence. Outside, the village softens into a calm hush, children indoors, and neighbors completing their final tasks. After dinner, Thomas sits near the hearth. The fire crackles softly, casting dancing shadows upon the walls. His family gathers around, sharing stories, advice, and small recollections of village life. The night outside deepens, with only the faint rustle of leaves or the occasional call of a nocturnal bird breaking the quiet. The warmth of the hearth and the closeness of family provide a comforting conclusion to the day's labor. Finally, as darkness settles fully over the village, Thomas climbs into his straw-stuffed pallet. The hearth cools slowly, the fire's glow softening, and the village sleeps under the gentle light of the moon. He breathes deeply, feeling the continuity of life and labor around him, and drifts into sleep, ready to awaken with the dawn and once more engage in the measured, enduring rhythm of peasant life. The fields, cottages, and surrounding woods rest quietly, each awaiting the inevitable return of another day's work and reflection. Dawn arrives gradually over the village, spilling a soft, pale light across the thatched roofs and wooden fences. Thomas stirs from his straw-filled pallet, the familiar roughness beneath him offering both comfort and reminder of the day's work ahead. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of frost and earth, and the gentle murmur of the waking village drifts through the open window. A rooster crows persistently in the distance, and the low bleating of goats punctuates the morning calm. Thomas rises carefully, mindful not to disturb his younger siblings still curled beneath blankets, and moves toward the hearth to coax a flame from the sleeping embers. He sets a small pot of water to heat, intending to prepare the thin morning gruel that will sustain him until the labor in the fields begins. The firelight flickers across the walls, illuminating simple implements, wooden bowls, clay pots, and a few tools left from yesterday's work. His family stirs quietly around him, the soft sounds of movement blending with the early light, a gentle accompaniment to the beginning of another day. Thomas tends first to the animals. The chickens cluck softly as he scatters feed across the straw, and the goats stretch and shift, nudging one another as he fills the water troughs. The cows in the pasture lift their heads lazily, their dark coats flecked with morning dew. Each movement is deliberate, a quiet ritual repeated daily, establishing the order and care that sustains life. The rhythm of tending the animals offers a calm focus, a grounding in the necessities that define peasant life. Once the animals are settled, Thomas heads toward the small garden patch behind the cottage. The soil is soft from spring rains, and young shoots of herbs and vegetables peek through the earth. He bends carefully, removing weeds and ensuring each plant has room to grow. He presses soil over tender roots and adjusts small support sticks for climbing plants, moving with patient precision. The faint hum of bees and the rustle of leaves accompany his work, a gentle reminder that life continues in quiet, predictable patterns, both human and natural. By mid-morning, Thomas joins neighbors in the larger fields on the village outskirts. The work is steady, ploughing, sowing seeds, and tending early crops. Oxen pull the wooden ploughs, their hooves soft against the tilled earth, and Thomas guides them with practiced hands. The sound of soil turning, the creak of harnesses, and the occasional call between villagers create a gentle, constant rhythm. Each furrow and seed represents not just labor, but the promise of sustenance, a quiet hope carried forward through patient, repeated effort. The sun climbs steadily, warming the fields and softening the coolness of the morning. Thomas pauses briefly to drink from a water skin, wiping his brow and observing the world around him. The patterns of daily life unfold, children chasing one another along paths, women moving purposefully between cottages, and neighbors exchanging greetings or brief observations across the field. Nature moves in tandem with human activity. The wind shifts, birds call, and distant trees sway, shaping the day's rhythm without disruption, a quiet framework for work and reflection. At midday, Thomas takes a pause beneath the shade of a tree. Bread, cheese, and a small portion of dried fruit make up the simple meal, eaten slowly and deliberately. Conversation is calm and practical, often focused on tasks, observations, or advice for the work still to come. Nearby, children wander, collecting sticks or peering curiously at the adults' labor, learning through observation as much as through instruction. The sun casts soft, lengthening shadows, and the village seems suspended in a gentle, deliberate moment, the passage of time marked by warmth, light, and quiet activity. After the meal, Thomas returns to his garden and fields. He tends the vegetables, checks the growth of young shoots, and removes any weeds that threaten their progress. His movements are methodical and unhurried, each task approached with steady focus. Around him the village hums softly, the lowing of cattle, the creak of tools, and distant voices creating a gentle background to his work. Every action, though simple, contributes to the household's survival and continuity, reinforcing the rhythm of life that structures the peasant's day. By mid-afternoon, Thomas turns his attention to the livestock once more. The cows are milked patiently, the goats guided back to their pens, and chickens collected for the evening. Tools are cleaned, fences inspected, and repairs made where necessary. Each small task is part of an ongoing cycle, a quiet labor that ensures stability and order. The physical effort is tangible, yet there is satisfaction in the certainty of results. Animals fed, fields tended, and home maintained, readying the household for the approaching evening. Evening settles softly over the village, painting the sky in gentle shades of orange and violet. Smoke curls from chimneys, carrying the aroma of boiling grains and roasting vegetables. Thomas returns to his cottage, hands calloused and steady, and begins preparing dinner. Conversation around the table is subdued, reflective and calm, encompassing observations from the day. Outside, the village grows still, children indoors, and neighbors completing the last of their tasks, each dwelling illuminated by the soft glow of hearth fire or lantern light. After the meal, the family gathers near the hearth. The fire flickers and crackles, casting dancing shadows along the walls. Thomas listens to the calm murmur of conversation, the sharing of brief stories, practical advice, and gentle recollections of village life. Night deepens outside, broken only by the rustle of leaves, a distant owl's call, or the occasional low sound from the surrounding woods. The warmth of the fire, the presence of family, and the sense of continuity provide a gentle closure to the day's labor. As darkness fully envelops the village, Thomas climbs into his straw pallet. The fire dims, the cottage quiets, and the village sleeps under the soft glow of the moon. He breathes slowly and deeply, feeling the steady pulse of life and labor around him, and drifts into sleep. The fields, cottages, and surrounding woods lie at rest, waiting patiently for the rhythm of another day to begin once more, the gentle, enduring cycle of peasant life carrying forward with each rising sun. The morning begins softly, the first pale light spilling across the village rooftops and the narrow paths between cottages. Thomas stirs beneath his straw-stuffed pallet, stretching carefully as the cool air seeps in through the small gaps in the walls. Outside, a rooster crows persistently, and the faint bleating of goats drifts across the misty fields. The quiet hum of early activity, wood smoke rising from neighboring hearths, the distant splash of water at the village well marks the start of another day. Thomas rises carefully, stepping over the rough floorboards to the hearth, where he rouses the embers into a modest flame. A small pot of water is set to boil, its hiss mingling with the faint creaks and murmurs of his family waking. Breakfast is simple. Coarse bread, perhaps a little cheese or a thin smear of butter, accompanied by the warm gruel made from yesterday's grains. The meal is shared quietly, conversations brief and practical, revolving around the day's work, the weather, and the subtle events of village life. Even these small exchanges carry a sense of continuity, binding the household together through shared routine and familiarity. Once the hearth is tidy and breakfast finished, Thomas moves to the animal pens. Chickens cluck softly as he scatters feed. Goats stretch and shift in their straw, nudging one another as he ensures water troughs are full, and cows in the distant pasture lift their heads lazily from grazing. Each movement is deliberate, part of the steady rhythm of care that defines village life. The work is not hurried, nor is it idle. It is persistent, practical, and reassuring in its constancy. By mid-morning, Thomas joins his neighbors in the larger fields. Today's labor involves sowing seeds, tending young crops, and guiding oxen pulling wooden plows through the soft soil. The rhythmic creak of harnesses, the gentle tug of the plows, and the muted calls exchanged between villagers form a gentle cadence, marking the day's progress. Each furrow carved into the earth represents not just effort, but hope and continuity, the promise that careful labor will yield sustenance and security in the weeks and months to come. The sun climbs steadily, warming the fields and softening the crispness of the morning air. Thomas pauses occasionally to drink from a water skin, wiping sweat from his brow and observing the world around him. Children play along the edges of the fields, gathering sticks, chasing one another, and learning through observation the subtle routines of labor and care. Women move between cottages and garden plots, carrying baskets or bundles, exchanging greetings with quiet smiles. The village hums with activity, measured and deliberate, every motion integrated into the unspoken rhythm of rural life. Midday brings a brief pause for sustenance and rest. Thomas sits beneath the shade of a tree, breaking bread with a small portion of cheese or dried fruit. Conversation is calm and practical, often involving news, advice, or observations about the land. Children linger nearby, watching the adults or imitating small tasks, learning patience, care, and the measured attention necessary for survival. The sun's warmth and the soft rustle of leaves create a peaceful backdrop, allowing the mind a moment of quiet reflection amidst the demands of labor. After the meal, Thomas returns to the garden behind his cottage. He bends carefully to tend vegetables, herbs, and young shoots, removing weeds, adjusting support sticks, and pressing soil gently over roots. The work is deliberate, each action purposeful, and the quiet hum of the village, the distant lowing of cattle, faint hammering from the blacksmith, and neighbors' soft voices, provides a gentle accompaniment. Every gesture, however small, contributes to the ongoing maintenance of the household and the village, sustaining a rhythm of life that repeats with measured regularity. By mid-afternoon, Thomas turns his attention back to the livestock. The cows are milked patiently, the goats guided into pens, and the chickens collected for the evening. Tools are cleaned and stored, fences checked and repaired where necessary, and small preparations are made for the next day. Each task, though simple, is essential, forming a web of continuity that underpins the household's stability. Labor is tiring, yet satisfying, offering the quiet assurance of a day well completed. Evening arrives slowly, the sky painted in soft hues of orange and violet. Smoke curls from chimneys, mingling with the earthy scent of the fields. Thomas returns to his cottage, hands calloused but steady, and begins preparing the evening meal. The family gathers around the table, conversation subdued and reflective, punctuated by occasional laughter or shared stories. Outside, the village settles into quiet, with children indoors and neighbors finishing final chores. Lanterns and fires flicker softly, casting gentle light on familiar paths and structures. After dinner, the family gathers near the hearth. The fire crackles quietly, casting shadows that dance across the walls. Stories, advice, and practical guidance are exchanged in calm tones. The night is deep and still, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves, distant owl calls, or soft sounds from the surrounding woods. The warmth of the fire, the presence of family, and the sense of order provide a gentle closure to the day's labor. Finally, as darkness blankets the village, Thomas climbs back into his straw-stuffed pallet. The hearth dims, the cottage quiets, and the village sleeps beneath the soft glow of the moon. He breathes deeply, feeling the quiet pulse of life and labor around him, and drifts into sleep. Fields, cottages, and woods lie at rest, awaiting the steady rhythm of another day, the enduring, measured cycle of peasant life continuing quietly with each rising sun. The morning, once begun, does not rush. After the animals are settled and the first work is underway, there is time for smaller things, the kinds of moments that do not announce themselves, but quietly shape the texture of life. Thomas makes his way along the village path toward the fields, carrying his tools over one shoulder. The path itself is worn smooth by generations of feet, its edges softened by grass and small stones pressed deep into the earth. He knows every bend without looking. In places the ground dips where rainwater collects in spring, and in others it rises slightly where carts have passed too often, compacting the soil into hard ridges. As he walks, he passes cottages much like his own. Some are newer, their timber frames still pale beneath the clay and daub. Others lean slightly, roofs sagging under the weight of years, their thatch patched and repatched with whatever could be found. Smoke seeps from small openings near the roofline, not in great plumes but in thin, lazy streams that drift upward and disappear into the cool air. From one doorway, an older man sits on a low stool, repairing a leather strap with careful fingers. He nods as Thomas passes, not bothering with words. Words are saved for when they are needed. From another cottage comes the sound of grinding grain, stone against stone, steady and patient. Somewhere nearby, a baby cries briefly, then quiets, soothed by a familiar voice. The fields lie just beyond the last row of cottages, opening into wide, uneven stretches of land divided into long, narrow strips. These strips are not fenced. Each man knows his own by memory and by habit. The boundaries exist more in shared understanding than in wood or stone. Disputes are rare, but when they happen, they are settled by elders who remember how the land has been worked for decades. Thomas steps onto his strip and sets down his tools. The soil here is dark and heavy, clinging to the blade of the hoe when he lifts it. He works slowly, breaking clumps, clearing stones, adjusting the shape of the furrows. Each movement is economical, learned over years of repetition. There is no wasted motion. His body knows the work as well as his mind does. As he works, his thoughts wander, not in grand directions but along familiar paths. He thinks about last winter, when the cold lingered longer than expected and the grain stores ran low. He remembers the careful rationing, the way meals grew smaller without complaint. Hunger was not spoken of openly, but it was understood. Everyone knew how close they lived to it. He also thinks about the coming months. If the weather holds, the harvest should be fair, not abundant, but enough. Enough is the measure by which most things are judged here. A little way off, two other men work their strips in near silence. One hums occasionally, not a tune so much as a low, repetitive sound, rising and falling with his breath. The other pauses now and then to straighten his back, pressing a hand into his lower spine before bending again to his task. No one comments. Fatigue is expected, endurance is assumed. As the sun climbs, warmth settles into the ground. The chill of morning fades, replaced by a gentle heaviness in the air. Insects begin to stir. A fly buzzes lazily past Thomas's ear. Somewhere beyond the fields, a dog barks once, then falls silent. Late in the morning, a small interruption ripples through the fields. A cart approaches along the path, its wheels creaking rhythmically. It belongs to the reeve, the Lord's appointed overseer, who rides atop it with a measured posture. He is not feared exactly, but his presence brings a subtle shift. Work continues, but backs straighten, and conversations quiet. The reeve does not stop at every field. He does not need to. His role is less about constant enforcement, and more about reminder, a visible connection between the village and obligations beyond it. When he does pause, it is only to exchange a few words with one of the older men, discussing the condition of the fields and the progress of planting. Thomas listens from a distance, not out of curiosity so much as habit. These conversations matter. They determine how much labor will be demanded later, how much grain will be taken as rent, how thin the margins may become. When the cart moves on, the fields exhale. Not audibly, but in the way shoulders relax and quiet murmurs return. Work resumes exactly as it was before, as if nothing had happened, and yet everything has been subtly reinforced. By midday, the body begins to signal its needs. The work does not stop all at once. Instead, one man pauses, then another, until small clusters form beneath trees or along the edges of the fields. Food is brought out in cloth bundles, bread wrapped in linen, a small piece of cheese, an onion cut cleanly in half. Thomas eats slowly. He does not rush meals. There is no benefit in doing so. Each bite is chewed carefully, not out of deliberation, but because food is valued. Waste, even of time spent eating, feels wrong. Nearby, a woman tells a quiet story to a small group, something about a calf born weak the previous spring that survived against expectation. The story is not dramatic, but it holds attention. Survival stories always do. They carry reassurance. Children sit close, listening without interruption. They learn not only from what is said, but from how it is said, calmly, without embellishment, accepting hardship as part of the world, rather than something to be overcome through force or cleverness. As the afternoon stretches on, Thomas returns to work, but the pace subtly changes. The sun is warmer now, the body heavier. Tasks that require precision are favored over brute effort. He checks fences, replacing a loose stake. He walks the edges of his strip, pulling stubborn weeds that threaten to spread. At one point he pauses to watch clouds gathering low on the horizon. Rain, perhaps. Not today, but soon. Rain is neither welcomed nor feared outright. It is assessed. Too little brings worry. Too much brings different worry. Toward evening, the work winds down naturally. Not by command, but by exhaustion and light. Shadows lengthen across the fields, stretching thin and blue. The village draws inward again, people drifting back toward their cottages with tools slung low, and movement slower than in the morning. Thomas lingers for a moment, looking across the land before turning away. It is not pride exactly that he feels, nor ownership. It is familiarity. The land is known to him in the way a body is known, imperfect, demanding, reliable enough. When he finally walks back toward the village, the air smells different. Smoke, yes, but also cooking, herbs crushed underfoot, warm bread. These smells signal the close of labor more clearly than the setting sun. The evening will bring its own small rituals, mending, quiet talk, shared warmth. But for now, there is only the steady walk home, the sound of his steps on the packed earth, and the soft certainty that tomorrow will unfold much the same, yet never exactly the same at all. As Thomas reaches the edge of the village, the sounds of the fields give way to the quieter, closer noises of home. A pot clinks softly as it is set aside, a door creaks on its hinges, and somewhere a dog scratches lazily at the dirt before settling down again. The village at this hour feels smaller, drawn inward, as if the day's labour has gently folded everyone back toward the hearth. Inside his cottage, the fire is coaxed into new life. Evening meals are never elaborate, but they are grounding. A pot hangs above the flames, simmering slowly, filled with vegetables pulled from the garden and grains stored from the last harvest. The smell is plain but reassuring. Thomas sits on a low bench while the food cooks, rubbing his hands together to ease the stiffness in his fingers. Small aches are part of the body now, expected and accepted without comment. Life here is shaped by repetition, but it is not empty. Within the sameness of days are countless small variations. A tool breaks and must be repaired. A neighbour falls ill, and work is quietly shared. A child learns to tie a knot properly for the first time. These moments rarely rise to the level of story, yet they are remembered all the same. After the meal, bowls are scraped clean, not ceremonially, but thoroughly. Nothing edible is wasted. Even scraps are saved, fed to animals or set aside for later use. Hunger is not a constant presence, but it is never far enough away to be forgotten. It exists as a quiet awareness, shaping habits and decisions without needing to be named. The evening hours are not idle. Thomas retrieves a worn cloak and begins repairing a tear along the hem. The stitching is uneven but functional. Nearby, a family member sharpens a blade against a stone, slow and careful, listening to the sound it makes to judge when the edge is ready. Another tends the fire, feeding it just enough wood to keep the warmth steady without wasting fuel. Conversation drifts in and out, unstructured. Someone mentions a wedding that will take place after the harvest. Another speaks of a cousin in a neighbouring village who lost a cow to sickness. These things matter. News does not travel fast, and what is known is shared repeatedly, each telling reinforcing its importance. Religion exists here not as constant ceremony, but as quiet structure. The church stands at the edge of the village, its bell visible from nearly every field. It marks time more than belief. Sundays bring rest of a kind, though animals still need care, and food still must be prepared. Feast days punctuate the year, offering brief moments of abundance, music, and shared celebration. These days are remembered long after they pass. Thomas remembers festivals from earlier years, when the village gathered in the open space near the church. There would be bread made with finer flour, ale brewed stronger than usual, and songs passed down through generations. For a time, labour softened its grip, replaced by laughter, dancing, and the rare feeling that survival was not the only concern. But most days are not festivals. Most days are quiet and practical. People rise, work, eat and sleep. And yet within that simplicity exists a deep understanding of the land and of time. Seasons are not abstract ideas. They are felt in the joints, in the soil, in the way light changes across the fields. Winter is remembered as much as it is anticipated. The cold presses inward, reducing life to its essentials. Work shifts indoors when possible, repairing tools, weaving, mending, telling stories by firelight. Food becomes plainer, portions smaller. The village grows quieter, bound together by necessity and shared endurance. Spring brings cautious optimism. The earth softens, animals give birth, and the first green shoots appear. There is relief in this, but also urgency. Missed planting cannot be recovered. Every able body works, from the youngest children carrying water to the oldest elders offering guidance from memory. Summer is labour-heavy and relentless. Days stretch long, and the sun demands constant effort. Harvest approaches slowly, then all at once. The village moves as one, cutting, binding, storing. These weeks are exhausting, but they are also purposeful. Success here determines the coming year. Autumn is a time of reckoning and preparation. Grain is measured, preserved and divided. Some goes to the Lord as rent, some to the church as tithe, and what remains must last. There is quiet calculation in this process, an unspoken arithmetic of survival. Thomas has grown up inside these cycles. He does not think of them as history or tradition. They are simply how things are. The world is not imagined as something that could be different. Change comes slowly, if at all, and usually through weather, illness, or decree from far away. Education, such as it exists, is practical. Thomas learned numbers well enough to count grain and measure seed. He knows when to plant by watching the stars and the soil. He knows which herbs soothe pain and which make it worse. These things are taught through demonstration, correction, repetition. Stories are the closest thing to leisure. In the evenings, especially in winter, elders recount events from long ago, a harsh winter that froze livestock in the fields, a fire that took half the village, a year of unexpected abundance that people still speak of with disbelief. These stories carry warnings, lessons, and reassurance that hardship can be survived. The wider world exists only faintly here. Thomas knows there are cities, monasteries, and wars, but they are distant, abstract. Occasionally a traveller passes through, bringing strange accents, unfamiliar clothing, and fragments of news. These visitors are listened to politely, questioned gently, and then watched carefully as they move on. Most villagers will never travel more than a day's walk from where they were born. Their lives are narrow in geography, but deep in familiarity. Every path, tree, and field holds memory. The land is not scenery, it is companion and responsibility. As night deepens, the fire burns lower. One by one, the household settles into sleep. Thomas lies on his pallet, staring briefly at the darkened ceiling. His body aches in places, but the ache is familiar, almost comforting. It confirms that the day was used well. Outside, the village rests. The bell tower stands silent. Fields lie dark and still. Somewhere beyond the cottages, an owl calls, its sound drifting across the land without urgency. Tomorrow will come as it always does, with light and labour. There will be work to do, meals to prepare, tools to mend, and small moments to carry quietly from one day to the next. And in this steady, unremarkable flow of time, life continues. Not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently, shaped by earth, season, and the patient endurance of those who live upon it. Sleep does not come all at once. It arrives gradually, layered over the quiet of the village. Thomas lies still, listening to the subtle sounds that remain when the day has fully withdrawn. The fire settles with a soft shift of embers. Wood contracts as it cools. Somewhere nearby, a mouse moves through the thatch, unnoticed and unremarked, part of the same enclosed world. When sleep finally takes hold, it is deep and untroubled. Dreams are simple, often indistinguishable from waking life. Fields appear, animals wander, familiar paths stretch on without end. There are no sharp divisions between memory, dream, and expectation. They blend together, shaped by repetition. The night passes quietly. Before dawn, the village is at its stillest. No voices carry, no tools move. The land seems to hold its breath. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance shifts again. Thomas wakes before the rooster calls, stirred by habit more than sound. His body knows when to rise. He sits up, pausing briefly, letting the stiffness ease from his limbs. The air is colder than it was the night before. He can feel it in his fingers, in the shallow breath he draws before swinging his legs over the side of the pallet. This early hour belongs to no one in particular. It is a quiet space between rest and labour. Thomas uses it without thinking. He steps outside to relieve himself, gazing briefly at the sky. The stars are still visible, pale and fading. He knows some of them by name, or at least by position. They have always been there, marking time more faithfully than any bell. Inside, the fire is rekindled. Morning tasks begin again, not as repetition but as continuation. Each day does not reset. It extends what came before. Grain stores are checked. A sack is shifted closer to the hearth to keep out damp. A broken handle is noted for later repair. As others in the household wake, the cottage fills with soft movement. No one speaks much at this hour. Words feel unnecessary. The work itself is the language. Outside, the village stirs in familiar sequence. Smoke rises, doors open, footsteps mark the paths. The well becomes a point of gathering. Not social, but practical. Buckets are lowered and raised. Water is shared without comment. The church bell rings faintly in the distance, not for service, but to mark the day. Its sound rolls across the fields, touching every cottage briefly before fading. It is not loud, but it is constant, a reminder of order beyond the village, of structure imposed gently but firmly. Thomas eats his breakfast, standing, tearing bread with practiced hands. He thinks briefly about the day ahead. There is fencing to repair near the far edge of the fields. One post has been leaning for weeks. If left too long, the damage will spread. He shoulders his tools and steps back onto the path. The ground is damp beneath his feet. Dew clings to the hems of his trousers. He walks without hurry, but without delay. Along the way, he passes an older woman bent over a basket of herbs. She is sorting them carefully. separating what will be dried from what will be used fresh. She greets him with a nod. Later, she may trade a small bundle for help lifting something heavy. These exchanges are rarely spoken of in advance. They emerge naturally, built on memory and trust. Work at the fence takes longer than expected. The soil has loosened more than Thomas thought. He digs deeper, setting the post firmly, packing earth and stones around its base. His hands grow numb in the cool ground. He works steadily, stopping only to stretch his fingers and shake out the stiffness. As he works, he hears voices approaching. Two men pass nearby, discussing a boundary dispute from a neighbouring village. It does not concern Thomas directly, but he listens anyway. Such disputes rarely remain isolated. Land is finite. Memory is long. Resolution often takes years. By late morning, the sun has warmed the air enough that Thomas removes his outer layer. He wipes his hands on his trousers, surveying the fence. It will hold, at least for now. He turns back toward the fields, joining others already at work. The day unfolds as it always does, but not identically. One ox limps slightly, slowing the pace. A child is scolded gently for wandering too close to a plough. A cloud drifts overhead, bringing brief shade. These small deviations matter. They are noted, remembered, adjusted for. Life here is not rigid. It is adaptive, responsive, shaped by countless minor decisions made without ceremony. At midday, the village gathers again, loosely. This time, a travelling peddler has arrived, his pack heavy with small goods. Buttons, needles, bits of ribbon, a dull mirror. People approach cautiously, curiosity tempered by caution. Coins are rare, trades are negotiated carefully. Thomas watches from a distance. He has little to offer and little to spare. Still, he listens as the peddler speaks of distant towns, of roads that stretch for days, of buildings taller than any tree in the village. These descriptions are received politely, but without longing. They feel unreal, belonging to a different kind of life. When the peddler leaves, the village returns to itself. Work resumes. The interruption is absorbed and forgotten, leaving only faint impressions. As the afternoon wears on, fatigue settles deeper into the body. Movements slow, tasks become simpler. Attention narrows. Thomas spends time sharpening tools, an activity that requires focus but little strength. The scrape of metal against stone is steady and calming. Toward evening, clouds gather again, heavier now. The air thickens. Someone remarks quietly that rain may come overnight. This is noted, accepted. Tools are covered. Grain is moved under shelter. Adjustments are made without complaint. The evening meal is quieter than usual. Everyone feels the weight of the day. Afterward, there is little conversation. The fire burns low. Shadows cling to the corners of the room. Thomas sits for a while, hands resting on his knees, watching the flames. He is not thinking of anything in particular. This too is part of life here. Moments without purpose, without narrative, simply existing. When he finally lies down, the rain begins. It falls softly at first, tapping against the thatch, then steadier, a gentle, persistent sound. The village is enclosed again, turned inward by weather and darkness. Thomas listens until sleep takes him once more, the rain blending into the familiar background of breath and heartbeat, carrying the village quietly forward through another night. Rain continues through the night, steady and patient. It soaks into the ground, darkening the paths and swelling the shallow ditches that guide water away from the cottages. By morning, the village carries the quiet smell of wet earth and wood. Roofs drip slowly. Mud gathers where feet have passed most often, soft and uneven. Thomas wakes to the sound of rain, easing into silence. He does not rise immediately. There is no urgency yet. The light outside is dim, filtered through low cloud. He listens for movement in the house. Others are stirring. Someone coughs softly. A log shifts in the hearth. When he steps outside, the air feels heavier than usual. The fields beyond the village lie dark and glossy, their furrows catching water. This kind of morning changes the day's work. Some tasks become impossible. Others become more pressing. He walks toward the animals first. They must be checked regardless of weather. The byre smells stronger after rain, damp straw mixing with the warmth of bodies. He moves among them calmly, laying a hand against a flank here, adjusting a tether there. Animals respond to routine. They recognize the rhythm of his presence. A neighbor joins him briefly, saying little. They work side by side, sharing the space without conversation. When the animals are settled, they part ways without farewell. Rain days often turn attention inward. Tools are repaired. Clothes are mended, stores are inspected. Thomas returns to the cottage and sets about fixing a tear in a sleeve. His stitches are rough but strong. Appearance matters little, durability matters a great deal. As the morning progresses, the village remains subdued. Fewer people linger outside. Children are kept close. Smoke hangs low, unable to rise properly through the damp air. Inside one cottage, an older man tells a story he has told many times before. It is not a story of heroes or distant lands. It is about a winter long ago, when frost lasted longer than expected, and grain ran thin. He describes how they stretched what they had, how neighbors shared, how one cow was lost and mourned more than some people might have been. The listeners know the ending already. They listen anyway. Memory serves a purpose here. Stories are not entertainment so much as instruction. They remind people what has been endured, and how. They shape expectation, quietly preparing the next generation for hardship that will almost certainly come. Later the rain returns briefly, lighter this time. Thomas steps outside to clear a blocked channel near the path. Water has pooled against one wall. Left unchecked, it could seep inside. He works with a simple shovel, moving mud and stones until the water finds its way again. As he works, a woman from another household stops to speak with him. She asks about a sick calf. He gives what advice he can, mostly drawn from experience rather than certainty. No one here expects perfect answers. Shared knowledge is pieced together slowly, refined over time. By midday, the clouds begin to thin. Light filters through, pale and uncertain. The village responds gradually. Doors open wider. People emerge again, testing the air. Thomas joins a small group repairing a section of communal fencing damaged by the rain. This fence matters to everyone. It marks grazing boundaries and keeps animals from wandering. Work is divided without discussion. Each person knows what to do. As they work, conversation drifts from task to task. Someone mentions a wedding planned for the coming month. There is discussion of food, of seating, of how many can reasonably be invited. Another mentions a dispute over inheritance that has gone unresolved. These matters are weighed quietly, without judgment. Such things are part of life, like weather. In the afternoon, a messenger arrives from the manor. He brings notice of an upcoming obligation, extra labor required for repairs to the Lord's road. The message is received without protest. Obligations are expected. They are woven into the fabric of existence. Thomas listens carefully. He calculates what this will mean for his own work. Days spent elsewhere must be balanced against what cannot be neglected at home. He adjusts his plans mentally, fitting the new demand into an already full schedule. As the day wanes, the village settles into a softer pace. The ground begins to firm as moisture sinks deeper. The smell of cooking drifts through the air again, familiar and grounding. Thomas shares an evening meal with others, sitting close, bowls resting on knees. The food is plain but satisfying. Conversation is sparse. Everyone is tired in a quiet, even way. Afterward, there is a brief gathering near the largest hearth. Someone hums a tune, low and repetitive. It is not performed. It simply exists, filling the space gently. Thoughts turn, as they often do at this hour, toward what lies beyond the village. Not with longing, but with curiosity. What happens on the other side of the hills? What changes slowly, unseen? These questions do not trouble sleep. They drift away unanswered. When Thomas lies down again, the ground outside is quiet. The rain has moved on. The village rests, held together by habit, shared labor, and the unspoken understanding that tomorrow will come, and with it, more work, more small moments, and the steady continuation of life as it has always been. Morning returns without ceremony. There is no clear line where night ends and day begins, only a gradual lightening of the sky and a thinning of shadows. Thomas wakes before anyone else this time, his body already accustomed to the rhythm. He lies still for a moment, listening. The village is quiet, but not empty. Somewhere a door opens softly. A bird calls once, then falls silent again. He rises and steps outside. The ground has firmed overnight. Patches of mist linger low in the fields, drifting slowly as if uncertain where to settle. The air carries the scent of wet leaves and smoke. It is a good morning for work that requires movement. Today, Thomas walks farther than usual, toward the edge of the village where woodland begins. He carries a simple axe and a coil of rope. Firewood must be gathered while conditions allow. Winter is never far from thought, even when the days are mild. The path narrows as he leaves the open ground behind. Trees close in, their branches still dripping faintly. He chooses fallen wood carefully, testing each piece before lifting it. Green wood is heavy and burns poorly. Experience has taught him what to take and what to leave. As he works, the forest remains calm. This is not wilderness, but it is not entirely claimed either. Paths shift slowly, trees fall and are replaced. People move through without dominating the space. A younger boy from the village appears not long after, sent on the same task. They work together briefly, exchanging few words. Thomas shows him how to split a thicker piece safely. The lesson is given quietly, without emphasis. Learning here happens through watching and doing, not explanation. When they return, the village is fully awake, smoke rises more strongly now. Animals are being led out to pasture. Children trail after adults, carrying small tools or baskets, eager to be useful. Thomas stacks the wood carefully near his cottage, covering it against future rain. He pauses, stretching his back, feeling the familiar pull of effort. There is satisfaction in seeing something completed. The rest of the morning is spent in the fields again. The soil, still damp, turns easily. Hands move in practiced rhythm. Work is shared, sometimes in silence, sometimes with brief exchanges. A joke is made and received without laughter, only a slight softening of expression. At midday, Thomas sits with others beneath a tree. They eat slowly, bread is broken, cheese divided. No one rushes. This pause is as much a part of the day as labor. Conversation turns to matters of belief. Briefly and without argument. Someone mentions a recent sermon. Another offers a different interpretation. The discussion fades naturally, unresolved. Certainty is rare here, and disagreement is not threatening. In the afternoon, Thomas helps repair a neighbor's roof. The thatch has slipped slightly. They work carefully, mindful of footing. This kind of help is given freely, with the understanding that it will be returned when needed. From the roof, Thomas can see much of the village. The cottages cluster close together, bound by paths worn smooth over generations. Beyond them, fields stretch outward, marked by hedges and ditches. Farther still, hills rise gently, their outlines softened by distance. It occurs to him briefly that this view has changed little in his lifetime. Change comes slowly here, measured in seasons rather than years. As evening approaches, shadows lengthen. Tools are put away. Animals are brought back in. The day begins to fold in on itself. Before returning home, Thomas stops at the church. It is quiet inside. He sits for a short time, not in prayer exactly, but in stillness. The space offers a different kind of order, one less tied to work. When he leaves, the sky is deepening toward dusk. The first stars are beginning to appear. Supper is taken quietly. Afterward, Thomas steps outside once more. The air has cooled. Crickets begin their steady sound. A dog moves along the path, then disappears into the darkness. He stands for a moment, hands resting at his sides, feeling the day settle around him. There is no sense of completion, only continuation. When he lies down to sleep, his body is tired, but his mind is calm. Tomorrow will bring its own demands, shaped by weather, need, and chance. For now, the village rests, held together by shared effort, and the slow, unbroken passage of time. Time in the village is not counted carefully. Days are remembered by what happened in them, not by number or name. A day when the well needed deepening. A day when a lamb was born early. A day when the river rose higher than expected. In this way, memory replaces calendar. Thomas wakes to a different kind of morning. The sky is clear, the air sharp. The rain has washed everything clean. Sound carries farther. Voices seem closer than they are. He begins the day by walking to the edge of the fields where the boundary stones lie. They mark divisions agreed upon long ago, their placements known more by tradition than by record. One stone has shifted slightly, likely loosened by the rain. Thomas sets it back into place, tamping the earth around it. Boundaries matter. Disputes begin where lines are allowed to blur. As he works, he thinks of the people who placed these stones originally. He does not know their names. No one does. Their work remains, long after their lives have ended. This is common here. Effort outlasts memory. Later in the morning, Thomas joins a group threshing grain stored from the previous harvest. The work is rhythmic, almost meditative. Flails rise and fall. Straw breaks apart. Grain separates slowly from chaff. Dust rises and settles. They work in near silence. Conversation would disrupt the rhythm. Each person knows when to step forward and when to pull back. This coordination is not planned. It has grown naturally over years of working together. When they stop, Thomas wipes his face with his sleeve. His muscles ache, but in a familiar way. This ache is not injury. It is confirmation of effort. Nearby, a woman sorts the grain, her hands moving quickly, efficiently. She sets aside what will be milled and what must be saved for seed. This distinction is important. Hunger in the future is decided by choices made now. As midday approaches, the church bell rings again. This time it calls people together. A brief gathering is held, not for worship alone, but for news. The priest speaks of an upcoming feast day, of preparations that must be made. He also speaks of illness in a distant parish. There is no alarm, only awareness. Such things travel slowly but inevitably. Afterward, people linger. Speaking in small groups, Thomas listens more than he talks. He learns things this way. Who is short on labour? Who may need help soon? Who has surplus to trade? In the afternoon, he visits a small plot behind the village where herbs are grown. The woman tending it shows him how to recognize which leaves are ready and which must be left. She speaks of their uses for pain, for fever, for sleep. Knowledge like this is not written down. It passes from hand to hand, voice to voice. Thomas takes a small bundle in exchange for wood he gathered earlier. Neither counts the value precisely. Balance is understood over time. As the sun lowers, the village grows quieter again. Children are called in, animals settle, smoke thins as fires are reduced. Thomas spends part of the evening repairing a basket. The reeds are stiff, but they bend under steady pressure. This work requires patience more than strength. He finds it calming. Someone nearby plays a simple tune on a small instrument. It repeats, wandering slightly, then returning. No one claps when it ends. The sound fades naturally. Before sleeping, Thomas steps outside once more. The night sky is clear. Stars fill it completely, undimmed by anything artificial. He recognizes patterns learned as a child, passed down without explanation of what they mean. Meaning is less important than familiarity. He feels no urgency to understand more. Life here does not encourage distant speculation. It rewards attention to what is close, what is immediate, what must be done tomorrow. He lies down, the sounds of the village around him, breath, movement, the occasional call of an animal. These sounds are constant. They do not intrude. They reassure. Sleep comes again, deep and even, carrying him forward into another day that will resemble the last, not as repetition, but as part of an unbroken flow. There are days when nothing outwardly notable occurs, and yet those days shape life just as much as any other. This is one of them. The morning arrives quietly, without cloud or wind, and the village responds in its usual way, as though guided by something older than thought. Thomas wakes with a dull stiffness in his shoulders. He stretches slowly, testing what will loosen with movement and what will remain for the day. Pain here is not alarming. It is measured, familiar, something to work around rather than resist. He begins with the well. The rope has frayed further, and though it still holds, it will not do so forever. He unknots the damaged length and replaces it with a newer section stored nearby. This kind of maintenance is constant. Things wear down faster than they can be replaced, and vigilance prevents loss. A woman arrives carrying an empty bucket. She waits while Thomas finishes tying the knot. They exchange a few words about the weather, about how long the ground may stay dry. These conversations are brief but meaningful. Weather governs everything. It decides what can be planted, what can be harvested, what can be preserved. As the bucket is raised, water spills slightly over the edge, darkening the packed earth. No one minds. Water is precious, but it is also meant to be used. Later, Thomas helps move stones for a new hearth being built at the edge of the village. The cottage belongs to a young couple recently joined. Their dwelling is small, unfinished in places, but it will grow sturdier over time. Nothing here is complete at once. The stones are heavy. They are passed hand to hand, lifted with care. Each is placed deliberately. A poorly set stone will crack when heated. Mistakes carry consequences that linger. As they work, older villagers watch and occasionally comment. Advice is offered sparingly, but when it is listened to. Experience commands quiet respect. At midday, the work pauses. People sit in small clusters, eating what they have brought. Someone shares dried apples. Another offers a sip from a flask. These gestures are simple, but they matter. Hunger is communal here. So is relief. Conversation turns briefly to marriage customs. Someone jokes about how little choice is truly involved. Another mentions how families weigh land, labor, and reputation more heavily than affection. No one argues. This is accepted as the way of things. Affection, when it comes, grows afterward. In the afternoon, Thomas walks to a neighboring village with two others. The path is narrow, worn by centuries of travel. They carry goods to trade: grain, a small bundle of wool, some cured meat. The walk is long enough to invite conversation. They speak of people who have left and never returned. A cousin who joined a monastery. A man who followed a lord to war and vanished. These stories are told without embellishment. Loss is not dramatized here. It is absorbed. The neighboring village is similar, but not the same. Its fields lie differently. Its cottages cluster more tightly. Faces are familiar but not intimate. Trade is conducted politely, carefully. Each side seeks advantage without hostility. Balance must be maintained if relations are to last. Thomas exchanges wool for a length of coarse cloth. He inspects it closely, feeling the weave. It will serve for repairs, perhaps for a new shirt if enough can be gathered later. They return before dusk. The walk back is quieter. Feet are tired. Shoulders ache under the weight of goods. As evening approaches, smoke rises again from hearths across the village. Supper is prepared with whatever is at hand. Tonight it is a thin stew, stretched with root vegetables and barley. It is filling enough. After the meal, people gather briefly near the open space at the center of the village. There is talk of an upcoming feast day, of the work it will interrupt and the preparation it will require. Feast days are welcomed, but they are not without cost. Work postponed must be reclaimed later. Someone recalls a feast from years ago when rain ruined the bread, and laughter replaced disappointment. Another remembers a time when supplies were scarce, and generosity mattered more than celebration. These memories coexist easily. Joy and hardship are not separate categories here. As darkness settles, the gathering dissolves naturally. No one signals its end. People drift away when they are ready. Thomas returns to his cottage and tends the fire. He feeds it carefully, conserving wood. He sits for a while, watching the flames consume what he offers. Fire demands constant attention. Neglect leads to cold. Excess leads to waste. Before sleeping, he reflects briefly on the day, not in detail, not with judgment, simply noting what was done and what remains. There is comfort in knowing what tomorrow will require. When he lies down, the village is quiet again. The night holds steady. Somewhere beyond the fields, an owl calls. Its sound is not ominous. It is simply part of the night's structure. Thomas closes his eyes. The world does not pause when he sleeps, but it slows. And that is enough. As seasons pass, the village changes not through sudden transformation, but through accumulation. Small adjustments, made day after day, shape the way people live. Thomas notices this without naming it. A path widens slightly where carts now pass more often. A hedge grows taller where it has been left untouched. A cottage gains a new beam, darker than the rest, marking a repair made years after the original frame was raised. This morning, Thomas wakes with the sense that something is expected of him beyond the ordinary. Not a command, but an awareness carried quietly through the village. It is the day when communal work is done on the mill stream, clearing silt and fallen branches, so water will flow properly again. He eats quickly and joins the others walking toward the stream. Tools are carried on shoulders. Conversation is minimal. The task is known to all. The stream lies just beyond the fields, narrow but steady. Its flow powers the mill that grinds grain for several villages. Without it, life would slow noticeably. Bread would take longer. Labor would increase. Work begins with clearing debris. Branches are lifted out. Stones are shifted. Mud is dug away. The water is cold, numbing hands and feet. Thomas works carefully, testing his footing before each step. This kind of work brings people together differently than field labor. It requires coordination and trust. One misstep can send water surging where it should not. Directions are given calmly. Corrections are made without blame. As they work, Thomas hears stories from older villagers about earlier floods, about years when the stream changed course entirely. Those stories serve as warning as much as memory. Nature here is familiar, but never fully controlled. By late morning, the flow improves. The stream runs clearer, faster. The group pauses, satisfied. No one celebrates. Completion is its own reward. They sit nearby to dry their boots and eat. The ground is cool. Someone passes around a small jug of ale. It is weak, brewed for hydration as much as enjoyment. Thomas drinks slowly, savouring the taste. Conversation drifts to customs beyond the village. Someone mentions how marriages are marked differently in a nearby region. Another speaks of a market town where coins are more common and barter less so. These differences are noted with curiosity, not envy. The village is content with its ways. In the afternoon, Thomas helps an older man carve new pegs for a wagon wheel. The man explains the importance of shaping the wood just so it will swell and hold when exposed to weather. These lessons are given once, repeated rarely, but remembered for life. As they work, the man speaks of his youth. He recalls days when he worked faster, carried more, slept less. He does not complain about age. He states it plainly. As fact, Thomas listens, absorbing not just the words but the acceptance beneath them. When the task is done, Thomas thanks him with a nod. Gratitude here is expressed through action more than speech. As evening approaches, clouds gather again, but this time they bring no rain. The sky deepens into soft grey. Birds settle, the air cools. Thomas returns home and spends time cleaning his tools. Mud is scraped away, metal is wiped dry. These actions extend the life of objects that cannot easily be replaced. Care is essential. Later, he visits a neighbour whose wife has recently given birth. The child sleeps wrapped tightly, barely stirring. Thomas offers a small bundle of herbs meant to ease discomfort. He does not linger. Visits are brief, respectful. The woman thanks him quietly. Her face shows fatigue and calm in equal measure. Life here arrives as it always has, with effort and uncertainty, but also continuity. At supper, Thomas eats slowly. He thinks briefly about how many people contribute to each meal. The farmer who grew the grain, the miller who ground it, the baker who shaped it, the hands that carried it home. These thoughts do not overwhelm him. They settle naturally. After the meal, he steps outside. The night is cool but clear. A faint glow marks the direction of the manor. Somewhere beyond that, roads stretch to places he will never see. He does not feel confined by this. His world is defined by what he can touch, repair, and rely upon. That is enough. Before sleeping, Thomas hears laughter from another cottage. It rises briefly, then fades. The sound carries warmth, even without context. He lies down and closes his eyes. Tomorrow will bring different work, shaped by weather, need, and obligation. It will be neither better nor worse, only next. The village settles again into stillness, held together by shared labour, quiet knowledge, and the slow patience of lives lived close to the land. The week moves forward without announcement. There is no sense of crossing into something new, only the steady layering of days. Thomas wakes to the same low light, the same muted sounds, but his body carries the memory of recent labour. Muscles remember what has been done and adjust to what must come next. This morning is set aside for work owed beyond the village. Thomas joins others walking toward the road that leads to the manor lands. The path is wider here, packed hard by carts and hooves. It bears marks of many uses: trade, obligation, authority. They arrive at a stretch of road where stones have loosened and ruts have deepened. The Lord's steward oversees the work, standing slightly apart. He speaks little. His presence is reminder enough. This labour is not optional. Thomas and the others set to work, lifting stones, filling gaps, smoothing the surface as best they can. The work is heavy and repetitive. It differs from village labour in subtle ways. There is less conversation, less shared rhythm. Each person focuses inward, conserving energy. Still, cooperation emerges. Someone steadies a stone while another sets it. Someone passes water when a man pauses too long. These gestures persist even under obligation. Habit overrides resentment. As the sun climbs, Thomas feels the strain more sharply. He adjusts his pace. Endurance here is not about speed, but persistence. He watches the road change slowly beneath his hands, becoming more even, more passable. At midday they are allowed a brief rest. They sit along the roadside, eating what they have brought. The steward moves among them, noting progress. He nods once, satisfied enough. During the pause, Thomas listens to the sounds beyond the road. Fields stretch away, worked by others just as he might have been. Life continues elsewhere, uninterrupted by this particular demand. The thought brings neither comfort nor frustration. It simply is. When the work ends, they are dismissed without ceremony. Thomas walks back toward the village, feeling the weight of fatigue settle deeper. This kind of tiredness lingers longer than usual. It reaches into bone and joint. The village receives them quietly. There is no acknowledgement of what has been done beyond an understanding shared by all. Obligations met and not celebrated. They are absorbed. That evening, Thomas eats more than usual. Hunger follows hard labour. He drinks water slowly, letting it ease the dryness in his throat. Conversation around him is sparse. Everyone is tired. After supper, someone begins to tell a story, not to entertain, but to pass the time until sleep feels near enough. It is a story about a man who once tried to leave the village to seek better fortune elsewhere. The story does not judge him. It simply recounts how he struggled, how he returned years later changed and quieter. The story ends without lesson stated. None is needed. The next day arrives softer. The sky is pale, the air mild. Thomas wakes feeling the lingering ache of the roadwork, but also relief that his labour today will belong to the village again. He spends the morning in his own plot, tending to soil that has been neglected while other duties took precedence. He works carefully, restoring what was disturbed. This kind of work feels grounding. The land responds directly. Effort yields visible change. As he works, he notices small signs of the season turning. Leaves have begun to dull. Insects move more slowly. Light shifts earlier in the afternoon. These changes are subtle, but they are watched closely. Timing matters. Preparation begins long before necessity is obvious. Later, Thomas helps slaughter a chicken. The act is done quickly, without ceremony, but with respect. Nothing is wasted. Feathers are collected. Meat is prepared. Blood is washed away carefully. This task carries weight, but not dread. Death here is familiar, part of sustenance. It is neither hidden nor dramatized. In the afternoon, Thomas visits an older woman who lives alone at the edge of the village. Her hands are stiff, her movements slow. He repairs a loose shutter for her, securing it before colder winds arrive. She thanks him with a small loaf, saved carefully. They speak briefly of her children, long grown, living elsewhere. She does not express loneliness directly. She speaks of them as part of her life still, carried in memory. As evening approaches, clouds gather again, but they pass without rain. The sky clears into a deepening blue. Smoke rises straight upward, undisturbed by wind. Thomas sits outside for a while, sharpening a blade. The sound is steady, repetitive. It draws his attention fully. Thoughts settle into the rhythm of motion. Nearby, a group of younger villagers practice with wooden staves, mimicking drills they have seen. There is laughter, but also focus. These skills are rarely used, but not ignored. The world beyond the village is not entirely peaceful. As darkness falls, the activity quiets. Fires are tended. Doors are closed. Animals settle. Thomas lies down, his body heavy, his mind unburdened. The days ahead will demand similar effort, shaped by weather, obligation and chance. He does not imagine anything different. The village rests again, enclosed by night, sustained by repetition, patience, and the quiet understanding that life continues not through grand moments, but through the careful tending of each ordinary day.